that are running the business that are honest and able. And, you know, it's easier to find people that are honest and able than it is to find businesses that are going to stay wonderful for a long period of time. There are a lot of businesses that looked like they were going to stay wonderful that really evaporated over time. But that's what we're looking for. And the nice thing about it is we don't have to find very many. If we find one a year, that's terrific. You know, because you don't need 100 or 1,000 great investment ideas to do well. You need a couple. And the discipline is the most important thing. We don't need brain power. We need discipline. You don't need 150 IQ to do what I do, thank God. You know, you don't need 140. You don't need 135. You may need 115 or something like that. But you do need discipline. You have to wait until you see the fat pitch to swing at. Because investing is a no-called strike game. You know, if I were a baseball player and I only liked pitches 2 inches above my navel, you know, some guy could learn that and he could pitch me, you know, 3 or 4 inches below that, and I get called out on strikes because I never find a pitch I like. You can get called out on strikes in baseball. You have to swing at pitches that you don't even necessarily like, particularly after the count gets to 2 strikes. In business, you don't have to swing at anything. You can sit there and the paper says General Motors at 68, or it says General Electric at 115, or it says General Dynamics at 63. And if you don't like those prices, you don't have to swing. You can wait there day after day after day after day, and there are no called strikes. Now, when you swing, when you decide to buy something, then, you know, if you swing and miss, it's a strike. But it's a marvelous game to be in because there are no called strikes, and you can simply wait for that one time in a month or 6 months or a year or 2 or 3 years when you really know what you're doing, where you like the price, where you like the people running the business, and then you swing, and you only need a few swings in your lifetime. So that's the way we try to pick businesses. We try to stay with things we understand. I mean, there can be all kinds of wonderful investment opportunities out there that I don't understand. I don't know what cocoa beans are going to do next year. You know, maybe you know, but I don't know. I don't know what crude oil is going to sell for. But I don't have to know. I just have to know the things. I have to know what I know. I have to know where the limits of my understanding are, what I call what my circle of competence is. And if I'm only able to evaluate 5% of the businesses in the world, no problem. I just stay within that 5% and try and find something. And that's, most people get in trouble because, in investments, because they get itchy. You know, they can't discipline themselves, and they hear about other people making money. Nothing upsets people so much as to hear about their friends making money. I mean, that's very destructive to discipline because they think, you know, I'm smarter than that guy next door, and he just bought that new car with the money he made trading stocks on the internet, so why can't I? Well, the answer is you can't over time. You will lose money if you trade stocks actively. And it's hard to exercise the discipline. But anytime you buy something, you should be able to take out a one-page sheet of paper and say, I'm buying General Motors at 65. I'm buying General Electric at 150 because. And you should write down the reasons. If you can't fill out the sheet, if it's because somebody told me about it at a cocktail party last night, that's not good enough. If it's because my broker told me about it, that's not good enough. You know, it's you've got to have a reason for thinking that it makes an intelligent investment. You do the same thing if you're buying a farm or an apartment house. If you're buying a farm, you'd say, I'm buying this farm at $1,000 an acre because I think I can earn $60 an acre on it if corn sells at such and such and soybean sells at such and yield is such and such. And you'd figure it out. That's the same reason you buy businesses. And when you buy stocks, you're buying a little piece of a business. And that's probably the most important thing to remember in investing, is that when you are buying a stock, you're buying a little piece of the business. And if you are buying it at an attractive price for the business, for the whole business, you're going to make money. And if you aren't, you know, over time you won't make money.
Hi, my name is Cliff McAvoy from Elkhorn, Mount Michael. Reverend Jesse Jackson talked to us earlier. He seemed to believe that the moral standards of today's society will eventually affect us in business. How do you feel this will affect us as youth growing up in the United States?
He said the moral standards will affect us how?
Like the moral decay in society today will affect us in business by how we feel and how we interact with other people.
Well, I think very difficult to quantify moral standards over time. I mean, You know, you can pick out huge weaknesses at any given time in terms of how people or the country is behaving, and huge strengths. So I think it's enormously difficult to quantify. I think by and large we have made progress in what I would call institutionalized moral standards in this country. I mean, you know, in terms of slavery, in terms of the women couldn't vote, you know, a century ago. Half the country were second-class citizens in that respect, and they had much lesser rights in terms of inheritance and all kinds of things. The income tax didn't exist 100 years ago, so the idea of taxing people according to how much that they benefited from society and their income didn't exist. So I think in terms of institutionalized moral standards, the country has made really quite significant progress in the last 100 years. I think, you know, there's an enormous distance to go. I think we're going in the right direction, maybe by fits and starts, but I think we're going in the right direction, and I think that you know, it will be a significant plus to everybody in this room if they live in a more moral society 40 years from now than a less moral. But I think the odds are that they will. I think the country moves in that direction. It's very difficult to do it, and all kinds of interests that work against it. But in the end, I think the American people want it. And you saw it in civil rights. I mean, it took television to dramatize what was going on, and people that weren't near it preferred not to think about it. But it got through to the conscience of the American people. And a lot of progress has been made there, and there's a lot left to be made, but it's better than it was. And the pace may seem very slow to those people involved, and I can understand that. The pace, you know, for women's suffrage, I mean, that went for decades and decades and decades. Women couldn't be on a jury. I was reading the trial of Clarence Darrow, which took place in California in about 10 or 11. You know, there were no women on the jury. The woman wasn't allowed to be on a jury. They weren't citizens in that sense. So it's the moral behavior of the country has, in my view, improved, but it, you know, and it'll continue to improve, and I hope you all in this room do your part to help it improve.
Hi, I'm Nick Jors from Central High, and I was wondering how, since the stock market's so high right now, if it'd be smart for us to get involved now or to wait till it goes down a little, or what?
Yeah, I can't tell you whether or not to buy stocks now generally. I think it's important that you save money, you know, and whether you put it in the stock market or not, I don't think is terribly important. I think if you're interested in stocks, you should buy it, you know, and you've got a little capital, you should buy a few. I mean, I don't think there's any way of learning about them better than experiencing it. Doing it on paper isn't the same. I can guarantee you, if you lose money on paper or lose real money, it's a different experience. And so I think you'll learn more about yourself if you do it that way. I bought my first stock when I was 11. I was at Rose Hill at the time, and I bought 3 shares of City Service Preferred at 38, and it went down to 27, which is something I still remember, even though I was 11 at the time. And then it went up to 40, and I sold it. I made $5 on my 3 shares after commissions, and then it went to 200 and something. So, you know, I probably remember that a little better than if I'd been doing it on paper. And I fooled around doing a lot of things between about age 11 and 19 in the stock market. I did charts, I did all kinds of technical analysis, I read every book I could get on the subject, and I didn't do that well. I didn't do terrible, but I was really just floundering around. But that meant by the age of 19, when I read Ben Graham's book, I was at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, I went and bought this book called The Intelligent Investor, just come out, and it had an enormous impact on me. Now, if I hadn't done, in the previous 8 years, if I hadn't been all over the lot, I'm not so sure that book would have had the same impact on me. I mean, by that time, I was prepared to read Ben Graham's book, which changed my life financially in an incredible way. I mean, I wouldn't be up here today if I hadn't read that book. But yeah, part of life is getting prepared so that when something does happen that's significant, you can grasp the significance of it and know what to do with it.